Hello everyone, welcome to my channel SW Metro official channel.
Every breath was a conscious effort, every slight shift in posture a seismic event. It was a room that had witnessed countless birthdays, holiday celebrations, and casual, wine-fueled evenings, but it had never held a silence quite like this. This was the silence before the storm, a pressure cooker of decades of unspoken grievances, polite smiles, and simmering resentment that was finally, irrevocably, about to blow. And at the epicenter stood Christine, a figure usually known for her bubbly effervescence and maternal warmth, now transformed into a pillar of unwavering, quiet resolve. The target of her gaze, sitting primly on the edge of the cream-colored sofa, was Robyn, the newest wife, the self-appointed peacemaker, the woman Christine had finally, after years of biting her tongue, decided to eviscerate with the truth. It had started, as these things often do, with something deceptively small. A comment about a family vacation schedule, a passive-aggressive remark disguised as concern. But for Christine, it was the final straw, the last grain of sand on a mountain of perceived slights, manipulations, and emotional theft that had accumulated over 12 long years. The conversation had danced around the issue for a few minutes, a familiar ballet of veiled accusations and wounded defensiveness, with Cody, as always, flitting between the role of frustrated patriarch and hapless victim. But then, Christine had held up a hand. The room stilled. The performative anger drained from her face, replaced by a terrifying and profound calm. She turned to Robyn, and when she spoke, her voice was not a shout but a clear, cold, surgical instrument. "You know, Robyn, for years I tried," she began, her eyes never leaving the other woman's. "I tried to welcome you. I tried to be your sister. I tried to follow the principle because I believed in the family. But you never wanted a sister. You never wanted a family. You wanted a kingdom, and you needed us to be your subjects." The words landed, not with an explosive bang, but with the chilling thud of absolute conviction. Mary, frozen in her armchair, looked as if she'd been slapped. Janelle, ever the pragmatist, leaned forward, her analytical mind finally being presented with the data it had long suspected but never confirmed. Christine continued, methodically dismantling the facade Robyn had presented to the world and, more importantly, to Cody. "You came in crying poverty, with your Victoria's Secret debt and your designer aspirations, and you made him feel like a savior. And he loved it. He needed to be needed, and you perfected the art of needing him more than any of us ever dared to. We were raising his children, building his legacy, but you? You were building his ego. And in doing so, you systematically took him from us." She didn't yell. She presented evidence, like a prosecutor before a jury of her peers. She spoke of the infamous wedding dress consultation, not as a simple error in judgment, but as the first calculated move in a campaign for dominance. She recounted private moments where Robyn's concern for Cody's strained relationships with his other wives was, in Christine's stark analysis, nothing more than strategic poison, subtly reinforcing his grievances and isolating him further. "You'd pull him aside," Christine said, her voice dripping with a bitterness she no longer cared to conceal. "You'd tell him how hard it must be for him to deal with us, how unreasonable we were being, how you would never treat him that way. You weren't mending fences, Robyn. You were pouring gasoline on them and handing him the match." Then she went for the jugular, the deepest, most festering wound of all, the children. "You didn't just take our husband," Christine said, and for the first time, her voice cracked with the raw emotion of a mother's protective fury. "You took our children's father. You created a home that was the fun house, the peaceful house, the house where Dad's mood was always good because he was only there for the good times. You made our homes, the places where we were dealing with real life, with bills, and teenagers, and homework, and stress, seem like miserable, chaotic battlegrounds he needed to escape from. You made us the problem, and yourself the solution. And my children, our children, paid the price. They lost time with their father because you needed all of his." The room was a gallery of stunned statues. Janelle's face was a mask of grim validation, every word Christine spoke was a key unlocking a decade of confusion and hurt. Mary looked utterly shattered, her own complicated history with Robyn now being viewed through Christine's devastatingly clear lens. She saw her own years of loyalty and isolation not as a personal failure but as the result of a masterful manipulation she'd been too vulnerable to see. Cody sputtered, his face a thunderous red, trying to interject, to defend, to regain control of a narrative that was spinning violently out of his grasp. "That's not true. Christine, you're being dramatic. You're rewriting history." But his protests were weak, pathetic noises against the brutal force of Christine's truth. He was a man watching the carefully constructed reality he had inhabited, one where he was the beleaguered hero navigating the complexities of his wife's emotions, crumble into dust, revealing the ugly, manipulated truth beneath. And Robyn? Robyn simply cried. But this time, the tears, which had always been her most effective weapon, her shield against all accountability, had no power here. They fell onto cheeks flushed with a mixture of shock and fury, but they did not evoke sympathy. In the harsh, unflinching light of Christine's confrontation, they looked like what they had perhaps always been, a tactic. She opened her mouth to speak, to offer her trademark wounded defense, but no sound came out. There was no rebuttal to a truth this comprehensive, no victim card to play when your entire victim narrative has been exposed as a carefully crafted fiction. Christine finally took a breath, the monumental speech complete. She had said everything. There was no more ammunition left because there was no more secrecy left. She had laid her entire truth on the table, a truth built on 12 years of observation, pain, and silent witness. The confrontation was over. The aftermath, however, was just beginning. The family was not just arguing, they were reeling. They were experiencing a collective paradigm shift so violent it was vertigo-inducing. Every memory, every argument, every moment of tension over the past decade was being instantly and painfully recontextualized through the framework Christine had just provided. The foundation of their entire plural marriage, a foundation already cracked and crumbling, had not just been shaken, it had been vaporized. Christine's words left behind a silent, smoking crater where their shared reality once stood. She had not just confronted Robyn, she had held up a mirror to the entire family, and the reflection staring back was so ugly, so raw, and so undeniable that it left them all, including the woman who had the courage to say it all aloud, utterly and completely shattered. The conversation was over, but the end of the family had finally, and officially, begun. Christine, who finally struck the match, not with a scream or a tear, but with a chilling, preternatural calm that was far more terrifying. For over a decade, she had been the family's sun, the source of warmth, of birthday parties, of laughter, of emotional labor that glued their fractured constellation together. But that sun had cooled into a distant, resolute star, and the light she now cast was unforgiving, exposing every crack, every lie, every unspoken resentment that had festered in the shadows. The confrontation with Robyn wasn't a catfight or a petty squabble, it was a sovereign state formally declaring its independence and, in doing so, reading a detailed indictment of the occupying power. And what she said, each word measured and laced with the quiet devastation of 1,000 suppressed hurts, left the entire family, and the audience watching, utterly reeling. She began not with an accusation, but with a reclamation of her own narrative. For years, Robyn had positioned herself as the family's emotional savior, the peacemaker who just loved everyone and was desperate to fix the broken relationships, a role that conveniently painted Christine as difficult and Cody as a victim of his wife's intransigence. Christine dismantled this narrative with surgical precision. "You didn't come into this family as a sister wife, Robyn," she stated, her voice steady, her eyes never leaving Robyn's. "You came in as Cody's wife, and you expected us to be your support system for your marriage. You never wanted a plural family, you wanted an audience for your monogamous romance with Cody, a collection of women to validate your relationship while you systematically separated him from everyone else." This wasn't a heated guess, it was a cold, hard analysis of the past 12 years, and it landed with the weight of irrefutable truth. She spoke of the infamous pre-courting rules Robyn imposed, the rejection of the family's wardrobe for a new, Robyn-approved one for Cody, the 11-day honeymoon while a newborn truly was at home, not as isolated grievances, but as evidence in a pattern of deliberate, calculated alienation. Then, she went for the core of Robyn's perceived victimhood, the narrative that she was an outsider never accepted by the other wives. You always say you were never let in, Christine continued, and the air grew colder. But you were the gatekeeper. You were the one